Welcome to the Scottish Geology Festival event run by the Geological Society of Glasgow. We're running 3 events. This is the first of the 3. So I'm talking on the fossil grove. Make sure everyone's muted. Yep. So I'm a geologist with the Geological Society of Glasgow. I live close to the fossil grove and I'm a member of the Fossil Grove Trust. We're trying to make sure that the fossil grove doesn't disappear. Let me just check again. Some more people not muted. Okay. Right, so starting again. All right, that's me. I'm going to just head on with the talk, and if everyone joins, I'll have to stop and mute them because otherwise it just gets too crackly and noisy, and it just puts me off as well. This is quite scary. I've just realised I talked to my mother on the phone this afternoon in Deepest, Shropshire, where I learnt my geology, and she's watching me tonight, so it's a bit scary, but I'm sure she'll understand what I'm talking about because she's been to the fossil grove with me and knows all about it. So here we go. I'm just going to hide these controls. Here we go. So a virtual tour of the fossil grove. We are going to go through the geology. I'm going to try and keep the geology at a fairly sort of entry level, but I will stray into some technical stuff a little bit, but just because I know I've got a varied audience tonight here. We'll talk about the history of the site. A lot of the conservation issues that are ongoing at the moment, and then what is the future for the site? Okay. If I keep looking over to my left, it's because I've got a screen on my left, which is my presentation, and I'm looking at all your lovely faces on the screen straight in front of me where my camera is. So I'm not being rude by looking over to the left, but that's just because I've got 2 screens, and it just makes it easier for me to control the meeting and do the presentation on 2 screens. So those of you who know where the fossil grove is don't need to look at this slide, but if you don't know where it is, it's in Victoria Park in the centre of Glasgow, west end of Glasgow, just north of the Clyde Tunnel, in the corner, tucked into the corner of what is now Victoria Park, to the sort of west of Partick and the city centre. I live in Scotstoun, which is over here. I'm just going to put my pointer on, which I forgot to do. There's a pointer. Here we are. So I'm living here and the park is just here. So it's very handy for me there. Here's an aerial shot of the park. This isn't the fossil grove. This is a bouncy park, bouncy playground that was, bouncy castle thing that was up at the time. But this is the fossil grove over in the corner here. So this area is the old quarry called Quarry Knowe, Knowe, which is a sort of high point in the quarry in the park area of high ground that was once a quarry. And that will go into the story of the quarry. But there's the building that houses the fossil grove here, and this is the rest of the park with its playing fields and play parks and its pond. And this is the Clyde Tunnel approach roads. Those of you who don't know Glasgow, this is the Clyde Tunnel here. And so that's Victoria Park and the sort of general locality of the building. So when you approach the fossil grove, if you've not been there, this is the approach to the building. This is obviously the building here. This used to be lovely ornamental beds in the old days when we had parkies that did flower beds. And this is a sort of ornamental, monument to put up in 2014 at the Commonwealth Games time of a model sort of lycopod or scale tree, which sort of reflects what's basically was growing in here. It's a bit of a model, but it's not bad actually in terms of its sort of overall morphology. The problem is it's rotting at the base and it needs to be fixed, but we'll come on to that. So this is the start of the tour. So first bit is the geology. So we're going to be geologists going into the building, and then we're going to take a tour around the quarry as well. So for the next wee while, we'll just talk rocks and trees and stuff. So this is the view. If you walk into the building and you look over what is called the eastern balcony, the viewing balcony, this is the view you currently get of the trees. So though if you've not been there before, this is your sort of first sight of the fossil grove. I'm not going to patronize you. Yeah, well, I am actually, because I'm going to ask you to count the trees, because this is what I do with young kids when they come and they say, how many trees are there? Can you find them all? Because you can see obviously a few tree stumps there, but there is actually a lot more than what you can see. So the first thing is number 1, they've all got numbers. Number 1 is actually hidden underneath the balcony, which people don't see until they actually peer over it. So we'll look at that in a second. This is number 2, a little viddy thing over here, quite small. Bernard Besley, who's a colleague of mine at university, thought maybe the roots of it are below there, and this is just the top of it. So maybe it isn't just so because it just sits there like that. So maybe it's got some roots underneath there. Number 3 is this big one here you see right in front of you when you stand at on the viewing balcony. Number 4 is the one that no one ever finds because it's just there. It's just its top's almost been cut off. It's just a sort of a stumplet sitting tucked in behind number 3. You have to sort of walk around the corner to the corner of the balcony to see number 4. It's there. It's over here. Number 5 is this big tree here, sort of half exposed. 6 is just sitting here. Number 7 is the classic one that everyone sees pictures of because it's got all its sort of root systems quite visible. Number 8's very obscure. It's tucked in underneath a bit of dolerite, which we'll talk about in a minute. Number 9 is over here, and that's got this spacer in it, which we'll talk about some more later, why that's got a spacer in it. Number 10 sits by the western viewing balcony here, and number 11 is the big tree in the corner. So that's 11 fossil trees. There's also some root systems. You can see a root system here. There's a root and a branch here. And down in here and over here are some big tree stumps. And there's also some fossil fragments of trees dotted around the place as well. So, and also here, you'll see a little bit of electronic gadgetry. This is one of 4 humidity and temperature monitors with a mobile phone aerial transmitting humidity and temperature data to my laptop here in Scotstoun, so I can monitor things remotely in the fossil grove. Someone says his slides aren't on his screen. Are you all seeing the pictures? Yes. Okay. So whoever Ian Roy is, you need to do something to your screen. He's got it now. Right. Okay. On we go. That's that. Right. So here's number 1 underneath. Here's a view with the camera taken underneath the viewing balcony, and here's stump 1, and here's a big tree trunk, a squished, flattened tree trunk that's lying on the floor of the fossil grove here behind stump number 1. So we now can see a sort of map here of the fossil grove with its sort of 11 trees. So this is number 1. So that view this view onto the right here is basically looking this way at the stump 2 and over to stump 5 in that sort of direction here. Yeah. Another view across this bit of the fossil grove excavation shows this beautifully ripple marked slab. Just when you get the lighting right, it's very beautiful. These sort of asymmetric current ripples, and a big branch stuck here as well. So this is this shot here across, looking at stump 6 across there. It's sort of a north-south shot looking west along the edge of the outcrop there. I'm going to show you stump 7, and I'm hopefully going to show you a video. I have to just turn the pointer off. Let's just see. Now, this is stump 7, and I'm going to click on it, and hopefully we're going to come up with a 3-dimensional moving image that the Historic Scotland have prepared. So this, I've tested this out, and it showed, and I did get this to work. So I'm going to have to wait for this thing to come up. Hopefully you can see something. It says loading 3D model. Can you see that? Okay. Right. Usual buttons you have to press here. Sometimes it has to load it twice. I don't know why, but just be patient here, because it is worth seeing if you've not seen it before. Here we are. Let's see if we can get it. I want to get it full screen if I can. I'll wait for it to fully load. Full screen, here we are. Okay, this is a laser scan done by Historic Scotland of stump 7. And if I take my mouse, I can actually turn this thing around. I don't know if you can hopefully see this going. Yeah. So it's a beautiful image of the tree stump. Yeah. And if I just sort of, I'm going to spin it around slowly because I know that there's a delay in the whole system here, so you can't always follow it, but I'll just turn the thing around and you can sort of go right on top of it. And if you look on top of it, you can actually see quite a few different features here. You can see the obvious bifurcation of the root systems. There's quite a few of these things that just bifurcate, and these trees, very characteristically, their roots and their branches bifurcated into two. So they weren't random branching like you get in a modern tree. These were very, very regular branched, sort of double branch. Every one went into two and then two again and two again as it went down. There's also, and I will talk about the reasons why this tree isn't circular, it's elliptical. Yeah, and we'll come on to talk about that as well. It also has a sort of pattern. These are ribbed patterns on the feature here. Yeah, you know, it's quite a nice sort of way of looking at these things, especially if you like to. Now you can't see them because it's closed, and you can also, you know, just see some of the features. Right, I'm going to escape from this and hopefully get back to the presentation when I close this. So there, that's stump 7. This is this stump here with its sort of quite elliptical sort of outline here, and that was this one here. And there's also some bits and bits of fossil branches kicking around here. And I think the next picture here is, yes, this bit. So this is a bit of the bark. So what you're seeing here isn't the bark. This is the bark with these diamond patterns on it, and that's why they were sometimes known as scale trees, because this looked like fish scales. Someone's asked why it's closed. The council open it in the summer, and it's an inside building, and obviously it's been, because of the current situation, they didn't open it. And I sometimes run tours there, but for obvious reasons, I didn't want to do that this summer, but hopefully next year. It's closed. I will talk a bit more about the visitor the attraction, or the site and its opening and the future of it at the very end. Okay, so hang on to that question, Phil. Will remind me to talk about it if I forget. Okay, so that's what we're seeing. These are the various branches and the trunks and the stumps. And I was saying the inside of what you're seeing on these rib patterns is the inside of the trunk. These trees were hollow at the time of fossilization. I'm going to come on to that story in a minute. And the outside would be covered with these diamond patterns, which are leaf scars. So this is the inside of the bark, the inside of the tree trunk, as it were, and this is the outside of it. Talk a bit more about the morphology of the trees in a second. There's another shot of this branch underneath this is with me with a camera underneath the balcony, looking at stump 1 here, and the big tree trunk there, and another patch of rippled sandstones here underneath the balcony, which is a bit, you don't see this from the top, and you need good lighting in the right angles to sort of pick up some of these ripple marks. But so what the features are, you're seeing these trees, 11 trees, various sizes and shapes, lots of bits of branch and debris, and some lovely ripple mark surfaces. Lepidodendron is the sort of species name given to the tree, and Stigmaria is the name given to the roots. And because they were found by the original describers in the Victorian times, they look so different, they were thought to be different and were given different species names. So Lepidodendron is the name given to the bark of the tree with its characteristic diamond patterns on it. And Stigmaria is the name given to the sort of roots with these sort of stomata, sort of circular impressions on it, which are the sort of the root systems. So this is let me just try this. This is a sort of diagrammatic representation of one of these trees, very tall and very slender, with quite shallow rooting systems, and then a very sort of pronounced crown with all the sort of leaf and branch assembly. You can see the bifurcation, this 2 into 2 into 2, with the root systems doing the same sort of things, yeah? Quite tall and thin. There's a sort of human for a scale. So these are pretty big trees and pretty slim trees. Someone asked me when I was there, was it windy in the Carboniferous? And I said, I didn't know, because these things, you'd think they must have been quite flexible to sort of be that thin and hollow and tall with shallow roots in a muddy swamp. So it must have been quite a strong sort of strong tree. And this is a sort of typical sort of reconstruction you see in textbooks of what a forest may have looked like that with the Lepidodendron. All the 11 trees in the grove are this species. There aren't any of the other ones at all. This is just diagrammatic, trying to show some other things in here. The one thing that's wrong with this picture is that all the trees look the same age. like a modern plantation. Yeah, it wouldn't have been like that. It would have been, as you've seen from the 11 stumps, some are big and some are small. So there would have been a varying size of the trees. It wouldn't have all been uniform size like this. But the spacing's about right, which is much wider than a current modern sort of man-made plantation. You saw the beauty of the fossil grove is that all the trees we see are in their growth positions. It tells us something about the density of the trees in these carboniferous swamps. Here's a sort of more diagrammatic sort of painting of these things with it sort of almost got cones which have got sort of spores in them. They're not pine cones as such with seeds, but they've got a sort of spore type of thing and a sort of droopy sort of thing down here. And the stigmaria, those little stomata things I showed you, probably have got probably the roots of the ends and terminations of little sort of hairy roots that came out of the terminations of the root systems underground. And the whole trunk was where the diamond patterns was covered in small sort of leaves, but they were probably quite sharp, pointy needles, more like pine needly type things. Now, some people have drawn them sticking up, and some people have drawn them sticking down. So I'm not quite sure which way they go at the moment. But they were certainly hollow. This is something from the Sheffield Area Geology Trust, with these strong outer cortex and an inner cortex that was softer, and in the middle, as you got higher in the tree, a sort of pith like a reed in the middle of it, and these sort of spores coming out of the cones, and these minor root systems as well. So the sort of complicated morphology of a tree. This is what's been proposed, is that some of these leaf systems pointed down, and when the trees were juvenile, they didn't have a crown. They were just like they were more like a pole tree rather than a scale tree. So these are probably some of the juvenile ones we see in the fossil grove possibly are like this, that they were just a sort of spire or spike. And then when it got to maturity, it then flowered, that's the wrong word, it didn't flower, but it then blossomed at the top with its sort of crown of branches at the top when it reached maturity. But it may have just grown a sort of like a hairy green spike to start with. Yeah. So what they're related to, people talk about ferns. And in fact, we've planted a lot of ferns in the fossil grove quarry area, but they're actually not related to ferns at all. They're not at all related to ferns. People talk about, are they related to horsetails? Horsetails are hollow and they've got a sort of growth structure that looks fairly similar, but they're not related to them either. But they are related to these sort of relatively primitive plants, the club mosses and the quillworts. They've got the same sort of morphology. In fact, that spiky thing you saw could be, you could suddenly start to see, it has some resemblance to these sort of spiky, things in the quillworts and the club mosses. So these are the living relatives of these ancient trees. But these are small, relatively niche things, unlike those lepidodendrons, which were the plant of its day. The coal swamps, these formed coal, and all the coal beds of the northern hemisphere and the Carboniferous are pretty much dominated by lepidodendron trees. They were the main tree of the age. So yes, this is what they are related to. Let's see how the trees formed, or the fossils formed. Fossilization is a very rare process. Most things don't fossilize. These trees did fossilize in the coal swamps, but just became a peat layer, which then was preserved and turned into a coal bed. So actually preservation of actual plant material is quite difficult. Otherwise it mainly just decays and get oxidized and get eaten away by bugs and stuff, and you never see it. So these trees grew in a swamp, and they were flooded by a flood of water of some description. Yeah, the flood basically knocked the tree over. The flood must have broken the tree stumps and knocked them flying, yeah, and washed away the bits. And that's why we see tree stumps, tree branches lying around in the fossil grove. So this is the next step, is this breaking off of what is now a dead tree. The inside then rots away. Remember, I showed you it had an outer cortex that was quite strong, but the inside was much more softer tissues, and they must have rotted away to form what would have been a hollow stump. Then another sand bed came in terms of another flood. A second flood event brought more sand into the area and filled up the hole. So this tree stump was then filled with sand, and that's quite unusual because this eventually within some time this outer cortex would have rotted away as well. So the timing is critical for fossilization, that we've actually got the hollowing out of the stump by decay of the inside, but the outer skin hadn't decayed, and it was strong enough to fill up with sand. Yeah, the outer cortex then turned to a coal, was coalified, went under burial, and then when it was dug out and excavated in the late 19th century, the coaly layer fell away. They couldn't preserve it or didn't know how to preserve it, so we're left with a sandstone mold of the inside of the tree. So that's what we're seeing today. So we've come from a living tree that was killed by a flood, hollowed out, filled with sand, and then exposed and excavated to form this interior mold of the tree. Here's a sort of block diagram that geologists love to draw of a river system. You can imagine something big like the Mississippi Delta. It has channel systems in levees with sort of lakes. You can imagine this is the levees of the Mississippi. This is Lake Pontchartrain and other sort of marginal lakes and lagoons here. And the natural levees can form from overbank flooding, and you can get little deltas forming into lakes and also into the swamp areas. The swampy areas where these trees would have grown. So there's some illustrative trees growing in this sort of swamp here, and there is a sort of flood event that's broken the levee here. The levee is in the brown color here. I'm going to put my pointer back on it so that's a bit easy to see. Okay, so this is the channel of the river with its sort of sand beds. This is the levee that's forming the river. Then the river floods, crashes through the levee. If you remember all those pictures of Hurricane Katrina and the sort of flood that came through the levees, well, that would have knocked some of these trees down. And that's the sort of the process by which we think these trees were sort of catastrophically knocked flying by these lobes of sand that prograded into the mud. And as this whole system sank deep down and was buried, where the swamp wasn't destroyed by a flood, you get a coal bed. Yeah, and then you get these little sand beds and what the miners would call washouts and things, where the sand lobes have cut into the swamp and demolished trees. Yeah, and then when you get the sea level rises, remember we'll talk a bit more about it in a minute, but the glaciation of this time on the southern hemisphere, the sea level rose up and down with the glaciation, and you suddenly got the whole area was flooded by the sea, and you get marine fossils overlying the coal. So this whole system is a whole interbeds of sand and mud and coal and marine shales and muds that form the bulk of the coal-bearing rocks of central Scotland, with these trees in them. So I've turned the map on its side because you saw the elliptical shape of the trees. There was number 7. Number 3's got quite an elliptical shape, and as has this one. And the ripple marks here all point that the river that knocked these down flowed from the northeast up here to the southwest. So it's quite consistent that the ripple marks and that the elliptical shapes of the trees give us some indication of what was going on with the current river system. Now I'm going to show a picture now of Scotland 300 million years ago, which won't look anything like Scotland today or even Britain today. So here's the outline of the British Isles. Yeah, the green areas are land or high ground. The blue areas is the sea, and the yellow bits are sort of swampy coastal plains like the Mississippi Delta area, and then these are huge plains of sand and mud coming down off the mountains. So this is the Fossil Grove in Glasgow. We're in the central Midland Valley of Scotland, which was a sort of a sandwich between the Highlands and the southern uplands at the time. These are remnants of the mountains that formed when England and Scotland collided 400 million years ago. So 300 million years ago, we were joined together, England and Scotland, but there was a sort of trough down west central part of Scotland, and the rivers flowed pretty much down the axis of this, and would have got into the sea down here eventually, or the sea each side of the southern uplands high. So these river systems, so what we're seeing in the Fossil Grove, this little tiny microcosm of this whole big river system, was just that we were seeing rivers flowing in this direction from sort of northeast to southwest. Yeah. So this is what was happening at that time. If you just sort of zoom out and sort of global Earth sort of zoom out of what Earth would have looked like 300 odd million years ago, there's the little square of the British Isles here. Basically, Gondwana and Laurussia are closing together to form Pangaea, basically. So Gondwana is the southern continents, Laurussia is the northern continents, and pretty much a lot of continents were clustered around the South Pole. And there was an ice cap. I mentioned that there was a glaciation at the time. So it's pretty, in some respects, similar to today. We've got tropical rainforests at the equator, and Scotland was pretty much on the equator at that time, and ice caps at the South Pole like we have today. So a temperature gradient pretty similar, but there's lots of differences as well. But nevertheless, we're in a tropical rainforest sort of climate on the equator. And that's why we have these massive tropical forests. Other plants that grew at the time, there were ferns, but they weren't spore ferns, they were seed ferns, but they looked fern-ish, which is why we've gone with ferns in the sort of planting in and around the quarry area. But these were seed ferns, and these are some examples of ones that I have on display in the Fossil Grove building when it's opened. So they were these sort of things looked like tree ferns, but they were ferns, looked like ferns, but they had seeds, not spores. We had things like horsetails. They were invented then. Calamites was a sort of a big horsetail type tree, not the little diddy things you see in the bogs and things that are only sort of a few centimeters, 10 centimeters, 20 centimeters tall. These things are 8 meters tall. They were big sort of horsetail trees. And we have these weird sort of things that look like a toilet brush, Sigularia, which is a sort of another lepidodendron type tree with similar sort of root systems, but weird morphologies with sort of cones on its side and these toilet brush branches, which look weird. And what was life like in the Carboniferous at that time? Now, we don't have any, apart from these plant fossils in the fossil, these don't come from the Fossil Grove. But basically, birds hadn't been invented yet. So the masters of the air were dragonflies, and Meganeura was one of the biggest ones. This is probably about as big as a seagull, if you can imagine that flapping around. Cockroaches, that's a modern cockroach. This was a Carboniferous cockroach, so pretty scary. Don't fancy one of them, 10, 20, 15 centimeters long cockroaches buzzing about. One of the reasons why we think a lot of these insects grew quite big was that the oxygen levels were quite high. The air was quite dense. The oxygen levels were probably at 35%, it's about 21% now, 35% in the Carboniferous. Carbon dioxide was very low. These plants took up all the carbon dioxide, which is probably why there was a bit of an ice cap as well, because it was the CO2 was drastically reduced in the Carboniferous because of the growth of all these plants. I mean, 100 million years before this, the plants had hardly been invented. So this was a major period of plant expansion, and obviously they enjoy CO2 for photosynthesis and took it out of the atmosphere. What else? Lots of things, sort of buggy things grew, scuttled around. I like to show kids these because they always come to the Fossil Grove and say, "Where are the dinosaurs? Come on, show us the dinosaurs." Well, these little lizardy things and these little sort of early tetrapods were sort of amphibian. This is amphibian turning into becoming a reptile. These are very early reptiles that if you go to the Museum of Scotland, you'll see these fossils. They're very rare, but they are about the same age. These are from West and East Lothian. Not from the Fossil Grove, obviously, but they would have. I could imagine them scuttling around in the undergrowth underneath these lepidodendron trees, in the lagoons and the lakes to the side of the river channels. We would have had things like the Bearsden shark, which is a strange beast because we still don't know what this appendage on its head was, and these giant sort of centipede type things, and some giant scorpions as well. This thing, you see it in Hunterian, the model of it there, it's a couple of meters long, so it's pretty scary stuff. These guys are quite wee. These guys are only sort of small lizard type things. But as I say to the kids, eventually these guys became dinosaurs 100 or so million years later. One of the tree stumps has got this sort of weird sort of bit of concrete in the middle of it, and the reason being is it has an igneous intrusion. Igneous rocks have intruded these rocks, these sedimentary rocks that were deposited 300 million years ago, and this has been cemented up because it all fell to pieces when the roof was bombed by accident in the Clydebank Blitz in 1941, and the stump was destroyed. Well, it fell to pieces because it was layered, because it had an igneous intrusion right through the middle of it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because it's quite interesting. So here's a laser scan map of the from historic Scotland, of looking down on the fossil grove with its trees. Here's number 3, 5, 7, 6, 9. This is the one with the igneous intrusion at number 9 here, and there's an igneous intrusion here which pretty much hides stump 8 over here. And these igneous intrusions were part of the quarry that was quarried when the park was, when it was turned into a park. It was a quarry, not for the stone of the around the fossils, but for dolerite, which is an igneous rock which was formed by molten rock, formed from molten rock that intruded into the fossil grove rocks somewhat later. And we think that actually the floor of the fossil grove, most of the floor is actually the top of one of these dolerite sill bodies. And also in the sides of it, you see that. And also in stump 9, we see this igneous rock. And if we look at some pictures of the side of it, we see here's a picture of the side of the rock. This is stump 8, hidden underneath in here. There's actually a stump here. But when we look at the igneous rock, we see this sort of band of rock here that just sort of thins out. And you can see it sort of thinning out down here. And if I color it in for you, you can see so this is sedimentary rock. This is sandstones and shales and bits of mud that are formed at the time of the fossil trees 330 million years ago. And this is a dolerite igneous rock that was intruded as molten rock into and intruded into the sandstones and shales. And it's probably about 290, 280 million years Permian age. It's slightly younger, 30 or 40 million years younger. Molten rock intruded in. If you look at the other side, there's one of my monitors sitting down there. You can see this sort of band of sort of brownish rock here. And if I color it in for you, it's that. And that's the igneous rock on that side. And this is a sort of cross section of the fossil grove. So there's the building that we're looking at. Here's the trees, and they're actually sloping. There's actually, you saw on some of the pictures there's actually a tilt on the rocks here. They've been tilted, and they've been intruded by this, the green. The yellow is the sand, mostly sands, and the grey is obviously the trees, and the dolerites are sort of sills. They are intruded along the bedding planes of the sand and the shales. And this is the dolerite here that was actually quarried. So when the fossils were, when the quarry was in operation, all of this area above here and here was all dolerite, and they were quarrying it out. And the bottom of the quarry was probably somewhere around here. Yeah, because they just took out the dolerite. They weren't interested. When they got to the sand, they gave up. But they were about 1 meter or so away from the tops of the trees. So they never saw them. In the quarry days, the trees weren't visible. They were discovered somewhat later. I'll come on to that in a minute. But basically, the cross section shows here, and they've got these sort of tongues of rock which thin out and cut through some of the stumps. The questions are, well, are there any more trees to be found? Some people say, what about here? What about here? Yeah, if we dug a hole here, would we find another tree? And that would be quite nice to do. But we probably need to put a new building over it if we're going to do that and do an excavation. But it's something for the future generations to think about, that could they actually uncover a real tree, another tree. How old is the fossil grove? This is a timeline. I'm going to expand it in a minute. This is going back from 0 now. This is us, humans, to the beginning of the formation of the Earth 4.5 billion years ago. So the oldest rocks in Scotland, up in Lewis, Harris, around about 2.5 to 3 billion years old. Most of the rocks of Scotland are formed in and around 500, 600, 400 billion years ago, round about here. The Carboniferous fossil grove is about 300 million years old. And if I expand that sort of section out down here, we can see we've got some major features of Scottish geology: Snowball Earth, the Iapetus Ocean, the Caledonian orogeny, the mountain building event that's in the Ordovician at 470, round about that sort of time, 470 up into the Silurian 420. The coal swamps of the fossil grove are at about 300, 330 million years, which predate the dinosaurs by 100 or so million years. So some people just want to know, where does it fit in the sort of overall scheme of things? Yeah. So yeah, quite young relative to sort of most of Scotland, but quite old relative to dinosaurs and us. But in Earth history terms, it's all quite young, really, when you think about how old the Earth actually is. Geologists love to draw vertical sections as if they managed to drill a well or a borehole. And these are the sort of Carboniferous rocks of central Scotland. And geologists love to split them up into sort of groups, really depending on the main rock or the main lithology types here. So, and they give them then formation names after the place that they were discovered, or mainly outcrop. So Stocky Muir, Kenniswood, Balagan. This pink is all the Clyde volcanics. That forms the Campses, the Kilpatricks. They're formed of these big lava piles, which are in the middle of the Carboniferous system, or the Carboniferous rocks of Scotland. Then there's a whole series of limestones and mudstones and sandstones, and then coal measures, which are dominated by sandstones and coals. And the fossil grove is actually in this area here. It's in what the old miners used to call the limestone coal formation, because it had coal and it had a few limestones. Sometimes when the areas are flooded by the sea in the Carboniferous times, you may have got a sort of limestone being formed. And then it's sandwiched between some rocks that have got a bit more limestone in them as well. So these were sort of cyclic sequences of sandstone, siltstones, mudstones, ironstones, and coals, with some mudstones and limestones above them. It's very typical rocks of the Carboniferous system. And then at the top bit of the Carboniferous is a lot more coal. And this is where the main coal-bearing rocks of the Carboniferous coal fields are in the upper part of the thing. And as you can see, it's quite thick. The rocks of central Scotland, you've got maybe 3 kilometers of rock in total being deposited in the Carboniferous. So that's a stratigraphic column, as we call it, in terms of thickness, but we can also redraw that in terms of time. So this is a time scale rather than a thickness scale. And it's just trying to show, when I put the thing in here, so that the around about 325 million years is the limestone coal formation, is round about there. The Clyde Plateau volcanics of the Camps is around about 340, so early Carboniferous. In England, this is all limestone. This is the time of the Carboniferous limestone, and this is the time of what, if you know your English geology, this is the time of the Millstone Grit, the Numerian. So this is the sort of so the fossil grove is about the same as the sort of Numerian Millstone Grit of the English sort of Carboniferous. So it's slightly older than the coal measures. We're not going to get too much into all this geology on the right-hand side here, except the dolerite sill that we've just been talking about is intruded. Then it's probably it's early Permian. So you've got a sort of an age difference between the two. There's a geological map of the locality. There's the sill. This is the limestone coal group, and if you went to Glasgow 100 years or so ago, you'd have found an iron ore mine where the Arnold Clark thing is at Crow Road. It's just about on an iron mine. There were coal mines everywhere. And this is sort of the geology of sort of underneath the sort of metropolis of Western Glasgow, with all its coal beds underground. There's the Clyde here. Yeah, and the whole Scottish economy and the Industrial Revolution was built on the coal beds of the Carboniferous, and you know, these coal beds were around Edinburgh, right underneath the Firth of Forth here, around Dunfermline, Alloa, Glasgow, Coalfield, Motherwell, right down here. So there were these coal beds, basically, where the Carboniferous was the rocks were the sort of industrial heart and the resource of central Scotland, along with iron ore. The iron mines is Whifflet. There was limestone, which you needed in your steel making for blast furnaces and for soil fertility. The Carboniferous rocks in some of those lagoons generated oil shale, where with a lot of organic debris in these lagoons. And a lot of building stone in Glasgow and central Scotland is from the Carboniferous. So the Carboniferous gave us a lot. We owe a lot to the Carboniferous. We wouldn't be here today without the Carboniferous. So it's an interesting part of the geology, and it owes us a lot. I've just zoomed in here quickly to show you some of the things that are going on in the fossil grove itself. I'm running a bit slow here, so I'm going to just speed up a little bit. There's the lycopod statue. There's the house. We've now seen all that. I'm just going to take a quick tour around the quarry, have a look at some of the geology of the quarry, and then we'll look at some of the conservation and history issues. Here's the dolerite sill with a sort of what's called a defile or ravine that was cut through it. This is the dolerite, and thin section looks like this: plagioclase, augites, olivines, and holes in here which are now seam, and carbonate. So this is a tessionite. For those who are interested in igneous rocks, this is a tessionite. It's a type of dolerite, an alkali dolerite, igneous rock, molten igneous rock once upon a time. And if you go into the quarry area, you see the pond, and you can see the beds of sandstone and the dolerite sill, bits of the dolerite sill above here. And this is cross-bedded sandstone. These are parts of the channel systems that demolish the trees. On the other side of this pond, you can see the base of the sill. You can follow it quite nicely here. There's also, the sill must have been intruded in several pulses because it's got beds of sedimentary rock caught up in it. So it may have been intruded here, and then here and here along the bedding planes and jacked up all the sediments. There's about 8 or 9 meters of dolerite sill exposed in the quarry. This is what the guys were after. They were after this hard rock here. When they got down to the soft sands at the bottom, they gave up. They weren't interested in that stuff. It was just rubbish. They just wanted the dolerite, which was used as a roadstone. It was just quarried for a roadstone. This is Ian and I looking at, on the other side, we've got these very steep dipping beds here. We think there's a sort of channel system in here. There's one of these channels that maybe that was one of the ones that were responsible for knocking the trees down. So that's quite an interesting sort of sedimentological feature in there. Whew. Right, I'm going to talk quickly about the history and then go on to the conservation, because I've got a lot to get through. Okay, so when was it? This is the quarry when it was, well, this is just after the quarry. The quarry was abandoned in about 1880, and then the park was created in 1885, and they built a road through here, and they went down, and remember I said the base of the quarry would be about here. They went down another meter to build this road and must have found the tops of the trees. Workmen must have seen a black circle or a black ellipse or something and obviously they decided to stop work, and they called in the Geological Society to have a look at this, because it was obviously of interest. And it was excavated. This is a parkie of the day, guarding the tree stumps from vandals and ne'er-do-wells. And it was described by these 3 Victorian gentlemen scientists, of course, Glenn, Kidston and Young, who are members of the Geological Society. So I suggest that some of us now are the sort of legacy holders of these. These guys are our legacy. We've got to sort of do what these guys described it and raise the money to get a building put over it, yeah, because it could have just been destroyed. But these guys were so, adamant that this was a wonderful thing. They were very excited about this. It was called Great Excitement. It was even called the Scottish Pompeii. It was just seen as a sort of wonderful thing. And the building was erected, and it became a sort of wonderful place to come and see and walk around and perambulate around and be seen by Victorian gentry. You can see the building here, the brick building here with its slate roof and a glazed timber, a glazed top. Inside, it was full of artifacts from the British Empire, ferns, decorations, a walkway through the middle of the thing, a cross timber roof with glass in the top. This is just another picture of it, showing me all sorts of bits and pieces, plants, elk skulls, all sorts of other bits, decorated things were sort of slung up to decorate it and make it interesting. Then the roof blew off in the 1940s, and it was replaced by this sort of glazed roof and this metal roof. See the metal in here? We'll come on to the story of the metal roof in a minute. But the timber was replaced by metal, and obviously some heating system. You can see some sort of pipes here. And up in here, there was a clear story built. Originally, it was just a pent roof like that, but it had this extra bit put on like a greenhouse at the top, and these windy things here to open and close the thing. So it had some ventilation and some heating. So these guys were the first conservationists to actually try and conserve it. Obviously struggling a bit. This brickwork doesn't look in great condition. It looks a bit sort of damp and dank to me anyway. But then remember, it was built on the rock with a hole in the ground with no damp-proof course anyway. So it was we're always going to struggle with the building. Then you can see this. There's the stump that was repaired there, and that's the new repair on it. And this is a picture taken in the 70s when it still had a glazed roof. And then in the 1990s, the glazing in the roof, the metal roof was originally glazed, was then replaced by panels, by plastic fiberglass type panels. and there's no ventilation provided in the roof. But it was decorated up, they did a nice job here, with moving picture images on a screen, the new model of the fossil grove. But of this blue thing here was a dragonfly that flew about on a light. It had a light show that from these overhead gantry lights, and the museum service sort of ran this place, and it spotlighted all the stumps. But you can see some dampness creeping in here, because the problem is that the building was becoming a dank cave because it hadn't got ventilation. So just talk very quickly about the management history of it, because up till 1990, for virtually its first 100 or so years, it was owned and operated by various bits of the Parks Department, and whatever it was called, or the city, the corporation, whatever it was called at the time. It was passed to museum service in about 1990, and that's when the new displays were put up, and the new lighting and the butterfly and the dragonfly thing. Fossil Grove Trust was set up in 1989 to manage funding that it got from a Brit Oil donation back in the sort of like 1989. The management of the whole system of the building was passed back to Parks Department 2007, when Glasgow Life was set up. When Glasgow Life, the ALIO, was set up, it was not seen as something that they could make. They wanted as part of their portfolio of buildings and museums. So it was passed back to the Parks Department to manage, along with the botanics. A steering group was set up by the Strathclyde Geoconservation Group, with members of the City Council, Scottish National Heritage and Geological Society, to try and sort of help the council with their interpretation, with funding, with conservation issues. Yeah, the Fossil Grove Trust sort of went into a bit of hibernation, but it was re-established in 2010 with a whole new bunch of trustees, including myself. We've now got 10 of us. 3 of them are city councillors, and there's 4 of us trustees from the Geological Society, plus representation from the local community. So we've got a sort of very active Fossil Grove Trust, and we've got a steering group, which was the steering group. Original steering group is now called the Advisory Group, and Historic Scotland have joined that as well. So we've got quite a lot of sort of science and community interest in sort of helping the council with the building. But the City Council, Parks Department still continue to own and operate the building. The problem is it's looking a bit sorry for itself. Those of you who have been to it relatively recently will see a lot of damp, a lot of water, a lot of lights don't work. It's pretty gloomy. It's looking pretty dilapidated, and that is a problem. These are the beautiful posters that the museums department put up in 1990, but you can see they've all fallen off the walls. The displays of fossils in these cabinets have disappeared and disintegrated, all looking pretty moldy. This is just white mold everywhere. Half of the lights don't work, and the gantry system, and there's a lot of water in the gantry system. Some of the chains and support brackets have broken, and you can see there's half the lights are gone, and all these beautiful lights here, and this screen and the laptop that did all the flying about stuff has all disappeared as well. Doesn't work, and a lot of water collecting in the low point, a lot of salt deposition. You see this white salts everywhere. And that's because basically there's a lot of humidity in the building, and it's dripping off the roof beams, and it's creating a lot of salt deposition and also below some of the structure beams. There's a lot of drip lines, which we call tram lines of water. You can see these quite prominent tram lines of water when you get a cold morning. It's humid inside. The roof is cold, and it just drips and drips and drips. The humidity inside is measured by these machines we've got here. Is incredibly high. There's more decay here, some salt, these salts deposits around the stumps here, and particularly around stump 1, where there's actually quite a lot of breakup of the surface, and we wanted to investigate this, and a lot of water seepage coming in as well. Now, Scotland is wet, and you can see here's I've just managed to pull out nearly over 100 years of rainfall data for the west of Scotland, and you can see here it's actually quite flat until about 1980. Yeah, and then suddenly in the last 20 or 30, 40 years, we've had increased rainfall. So there has been, the building has been beset by an increased rainfall, as well as being not having a lot of ventilation. So we've got double whammy going on here. So what are we doing about the conservation? Well, I mentioned the humidity monitors. We measure the humidity every 15 minutes. It transmits to my laptop every day, and I plot it out, and we look at the different fluctuations, and we've got monitors in different parts of the building to try and understand the sort of humidity regime in the building, where the water's coming from. And we know there are problems. We've got on the north-south wall, we've got leaf build-up against the wall. We've got dripping gutters. There's water coming down off broken gutters into the leaves, into the ground, and coming out inside the building. You can see here there's a lot of leaf problems in the gutters, and it blocks these downpipes. And there are sort of weeds and things growing in here. And we've got problems up in the roof here. And this is the bit that was the old ventilated clear story, where we used to open and close these things in the days when it was a glazed building, but these are all closed off, and this is the problem. City Council have been busy trying to unblock some of the drains, and they've done a lot of work with clearing and excavating some of the drain runs. This is a drain run right down the path here to the lycopod statue that was all re-excavated, so that's been quite useful. This is Historic Scotland came into the laser scanning, so they've been very good at helping us understand the problems of the building. And they started off by doing this big map. You can see here, these are when this is taken some time ago, when all these posters were falling off the wall. This is the laser scanning in process, and they did a scan of the outside of the building as well. So that was quite a useful thing. And you saw the stump picture generated from those earlier, and the stump sort of map that I showed earlier as well, with the trees and the whole thing on it. We've also been putting some time-lapse cameras here. So I wanted to just show you a time-lapse camera picture of this. I may have to just turn this laser pointer off and press this and just see if this works. Okay, this is about 6 days of time-lapse pictures of a pool of water that forms when it rains. You can just see the water coming in. You can see all this. You see the water is coming in from the side here, yeah, when it rains. And it comes in down the bedding planes of the rocks here. You watch when it rains. Here's another rain shower, yeah. Here it comes, and the water comes in and fills the pool up, yeah. Then the water drains away again. And then it rains again. I think there's one more rain. There we are, one more rain shower. Oh, I don't want to start again. Stop. Go on. How do you? There we are. So this is this pool of water that we've got here, and we think we had a blocked down pipe here. We had a blocked pipe here, down pipe that blocked with leaves and stuff that was causing water to pool up around here. We had a leaking gutter that I was showing you earlier that was causing water to come in down here, and it all flowed down into this pond. We had a blocked bed down pipe in this corner, and we had holes in the roof, and we had these tram lines of deposits of water and salt coming off the beams in the roof. So we've got a sort of quite a host of problems to deal with. And there's the sort of downpipe here with it's blocked underground, and it was seeping through here, filling up the pond like you just saw in the video. Water coming in on the south banking into that trough with leaves and percolating in, dripping off this joint here, dripping off the roof beams all into there. So these are sort of the summary of the sort of water ingress problems we had. And these waters were depositing salts on the bed of the fossil grove and breaking up the surface, and we wanted to know a bit more about them. So Historic Scotland did some X-ray diffraction studies and said that, oh yeah, some of the white stuff is gypsum, that's all right, that's just sort of standard salt you'd see on any sort of new brick building. But some of it was hexahydrite, which is magnesium sulfate, and magnesium sulfate can either be 6 waters or 7 waters, depending on what the humidity is. Epsomite is Epsom salts, which is magnesium sulfate, with 7 waters, and hexahydrite has 6 waters. And as humidity changes up and down, increases and decreases, if you increase the humidity, you go from 6 to 7 waters. It takes on extra water, the crystal gets bigger. And then if you take the water, if it dries out, it goes back to 6 and gets smaller. That opening and bigger increase and decrease in volume, if that crystal's embedded it becomes embedded into the structure of the rocks, it can break up the rock surface. So this magnesium was our problem. This is what was caught with gypsum. We could cope with it. You could just brush it off. But this hexahydrite epsomite stuff, we wanted to know where it come from, and B, we want to know how to get rid of it. Obviously, having a stable humidity where you're not getting these phase changes from hexahydrite to epsomite is a good thing. If we can stop it changing, that will be good. We found out that basically the calcium gypsum salts were mainly in the walls of the building, in the rock walls, but these tram lines had the magnesium, so that we thought it must be coming from the roof. Yeah. So we did some, Historic Scotland did some sampling of the beams and the paint, and we don't know where it came from. We still don't know where the magnesium has come from. But Historic Scotland carried on with their work. They've done a lot of, they produced a gridded decay map of all the decay and all the tram lines and all the places. They looked at every square meter and made a map of every square meter of the fossil grove, gridded it up. So, you know, this is square T4, and they looked at every grid square and decided what to describe exactly what the decay was for future reference. So we're very indebted to Historic Scotland. This is Ewan from Historic Scotland, and we had some big meetings with SNH, with the City Council, to try and understand, and some trustees here to try and get some progress on what we're going to do about all this. Scottish National Heritage, or Nature Scot as it's now called, monitor the condition of the triple SI, and they originally it was down as status 1, favourable and maintained, and it would have been that in the 1990s, but it's come down, and now it's now here, unfavourable condition and partially destroyed because we're losing some of the surface features of the fossils. And it's not because, and this is not, this sort of thing normally happens when an SSI, like a golf course, is built over some dune systems and it's active destruction, but this is actually destruction that's gone on because of lack of action more than anything else. It's just, you know, the amount of, just hasn't had the investment in it to try and ameliorate some of the conditions in it. So Fossil Grove Trust have got quite worried about this, and we've decided to get in to do some priority repairs. City Council have got no money, don't want to do anything with it really. It's not a priority for them. So the Fossil Grove Trust have just took it on themselves to try and do some of these things ourselves. So we had to go at lighting, got the drains fixed, looked at the roof, cleaned it, and put some ventilation in it. So this is us fixing that. These are new lights. These are tapes we put up so the electricians didn't stamp over the fossils with their tackety boots, put the ladders where I told them to put the green tape. But I put the green tape for the ladders, put some cones up to stop them walking everywhere. But we got the lights fixed, and we got this thing fixed up in the roof here. There's the old thing here, the old screen. And this is their safe passages and some mats as well. So we've got the lights fixed in time for the visitors that didn't come at Easter. This was done in about November, December, ready for the tourist season, which hasn't happened. But anyway, we have nice lights now, so it's much better than it was. These LED lights, but the old ones were just typical incandescent bulbs, and they were always breaking. But these are LEDs, and we can also turn them and point them at the various features as well. We steam clean the roof. We've got a big machine in, some guys up on a cherry picker there, and we steam clean the roof, got all the debris and the birch trees out of it, and there's a nice clean roof. And we put some grills in. There's our nice grills. We've got 8 of these things in here to give a bit of ventilation. Oops, let's go back. And we looked at we did here, and this is me climbing, well, this is my ladder and my hose pipe. We actually poked a hose in every pipe to try and test where the water had gone to. And then this one was repaired again because this one was the one that was causing the problems and ponding up the water that you saw in the video. So this was we then got this redug again for the 3rd time to try and, because the previous attempts had failed to fix this one, but it's now fixed, and we now have water running clear through this downpipe. So we've been I've been measuring humidity for since 2017. You can see here, these are the sort of, it's very seasonal. It's very saturated in the winter, and in the summer it sort of it dries out a bit. And we're kind of, people are asking, well, has this made any difference? Fixing these pipes, clearing up these pipes, and putting grills, has it made a difference? Possibly. Hopefully. It looks drier. There's a picture of it this spring. Admitted it was a dry spell, but that pond of water that was on the video has never appeared since. So we're hoping that the drain that was blocked here has done the business. It's still we've still got some drips on because the next steps are to sort of when it rains, that dryness, so that we get these wet patches. The pond is still gone, but we get wet patches here from the roof, and we think there's a problem here, up underneath this join here, this clear story to the roof join, and at the gable ends at the heads here. So we've now got a contractor in that's going to start hopefully next week. It depends on things, to put a lead strip along here and the lead strips down each side of this, and then if that works, do it on the other side as well. and try and sort of stop some of the roof leaks. That's the next plan. Just want to talk about visitor numbers, because this is a people ask, well, how many people actually come to it? So it's been in the last 3 years. I've been given the council parkies who sit there on the Saturday and Sunday afternoons a desk diary, and they do a little sort of a 5-barred gate sort of thing every time someone comes in. They have a clicker, and they take some sort of measurements of the number of people. But it has increased. So number of visitors per day open. So it's only open Saturday and Sunday afternoons, but we get about nearly 100 people every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from April to October coming in to look at this thing. And a lot of it's local people who love this place. Yeah, they come to see their trees, and they say, oh, I haven't been here for ages, but I wanted to come back to check on my trees and how the trees are doing. And I saw this picture. Someone had drawn this in the visitor book, and I thought it was lovely. I just thought it was a really nice sort of, some of the local people just come to have a chat and a natter at the fossil grove. It was really nice, and the light was working. So what next? Well, we're discussing with the trust are discussing with the council a management lease arrangement. Now it's in discussion at the moment, so I don't have any news on whether that's going to happen, but I think something will happen, that the Fossil Grove Trust in some form or other may take over the sort of day-to-day management, but not the ownership. We don't really want to own it, and we may have to change our constitution. We have to become a SGO, for those of people who know about SGOs, so we don't get liability. As personal people, I don't really want to own 1/10 of the building. I want it still to be owned by some entity. What to do next year? How do we open it? Yeah, so we're talking about possibility. If the council won't open it and can't open it, we do sort of once a month open days with volunteers to sort of do talks, maybe use some of the earth science students at the university, so we have people that know something about it to talk about it. We're looking at future options. We've got some discussions going on with the Architectural Heritage Fund, looking at future options, whether we could raise enough money whether it would be worth trying to get a new build or refurbishment. We've done some of these things in the past, looking at options. This was done in 2014, where there were 3 options were looked at, like just a wee extension, a sort of big extension, and a complete rebuild. And there's a sort of architects love doing these things. There's a sort of an artist impression of what could be done if you had a new build. Yeah. One option we're looking at, well, we're going to get, this was put into a Heritage Lottery Fund bid in 2014, and it was knocked back as at draft stage at that stage, because they wanted to see how much it fitted in, where it fitted in with the strategy of the park, and what its sustainability, how you were going to run it. It's all very well getting X million pounds to build this thing, but where was your money coming to run the building, to pay the staff, to pay the heating, lighting, insurance, all that sort of stuff? Where was the business plan for all that? And it's difficult. If the Fossil Grove Trust were to sort of run this building, the biggest problem is, how do you get income when you can't really charge? You could put a donation bin in the front of it and expect some people to put a bit of money in it, but it's a difficult thing running a museum, and it's quite a museum or an attraction. It's quite difficult. So we're looking at options, whether we can, getting some consultants in to see whether we can, is it worth doing this, or should we do something more like this, somewhere between these sorts of things, sort of adapt the house. Here's an idea. This is just a very poor panorama picture. Maybe we could put some windows in with some lights inside there. As you walk past, it triggers lights and you can see inside, and then every month you have an open day and it's open. But maybe you can walk past it and see inside. Just an idea. So these are ideas we're going to throw at the consultants to say, well, is this possible? Is it even structurally viable to actually knock a hole in the wall here, put a big steel beam in here? Are these Victorian walls up to it? Would it knock the roof down? So we've got lots of things to consider whether this is a viable option. So yes, that's pretty much it. There's a leaflet we've done with the Strathclyde Geoconservation Group. We're indebted to the Geological Society of Glasgow. With a lot of support there. I've written a wee guide book that's available on the website, which I've got for fossilgroveglasgow.org. We're indebted immensely to Nature Scotland, NHS, SNH as I still called it to me. Historic Scotland have done a huge amount of work for us. and it really helped us immensely understand what's going on in the building here. And this has all been run by the new Scottish Geology Trust, this presentation as part of the Scottish Geology Festival. So I know some people had emailed me and said, can we donate anything? Well, yes, you can. The Scottish Geology Trust is a new body looking at the funding for Scottish geology amongst many things it's doing. And there are press buttons to donate in the Scottish Geology Trust websites. We've got 2 more events that we're running. We've got Thursday night, we've got Angus Miller from GeoWalks talking about the Braden Blackford Hills. So you're welcome to get, you will get anyone that's got an email today or in the last few days about this talk will get one probably tomorrow about Angus's talk on Thursday night. And then next Wednesday night, we've got Margaret Green from the Geoconservation Group, Statra Geoconservation Group, talking about a virtual tour of the necropolis of Glasgow Necropolis, which is a very interesting place, both from a geological, geomorphological perspective as a crag and tail, and wonderful rocks in all the tombs, and a great history as well, a lovely walk. So I recommend Margaret's talk to you and Angus's talk to you. There are also some lectures that the Geological Society are running as part of their standard program, except it's not standard because we're running them on Zoom over the winter, but we would normally run Thursday night, second Thursday of the month talks, and we've got one on October, November, and December. So if you want to type any questions, if you just want to type something and then you want to speak, that's fine because you can unmute yourself. I just didn't want everyone to start talking, but if you've got any questions, I will try and answer them. Fran, you said about geophysics, any buried? We never thought about that. That's an interesting one. So geophysics, it's difficult to know because they're sandstone in sandstone. So you would put, there isn't really a sort of contrast between the bedrock and the fossils. So I have to think about it, but I'm not sure it would really work, but it's certainly something I hadn't thought of. Yeah. Bill has asked, where did the money come from the recent repairs and renovations? Yeah, we remember we got money from Brit Oil, so we do have a pot of money, but we've been reluctant over the years to spend it on repairs when it was not owned by the Fossil Grove Trust. It was owned by the council. The money that we got from Brit Oil was pretty much for development, so we wanted to use it for in the terms match funding. So if we went for a new build, we'd have our money that we could put into the pot. If we'd spent it all on gutters and drains and grills and we had nothing left, we wouldn't have anything to offer to match fund with anything we got from a lottery. So with reluctance, we've spent money on the grills and the lights and the repairs, just because we, as the sort of descendants of the original Victorian scientists of the Geological Society, we want to conserve the fossils for the next generation. So we've got to do something. We've reluctantly had to spend our own money that we didn't really want to spend, but life is what it is. You know, we are where we are. And we have spent some of our money on that, and I guess we're going to have to continue to spend some money like that. So that's, you know, we're in a quandary at the moment. We're not sure exactly how to go with this thing. We just know we need to change. We need to do something with the building and preserve the fossils at all costs. Well, not all costs, but preserve the fossils so that there's something worth putting the building over. Yeah. And it's a locally loved attraction, and we'd hate to see it sort of deteriorate any further. Yeah. Graham Wilson, very interesting. Remember a photo of in the first geology book I was given. Well, Tony Spencer is also on tonight as a geologist. He remembers this book, which is Arthur Holmes's Principles of Physical Geology. I think that's the book you're talking about, Graham. Well, because you and I think you and I were at uni together, and this is our Bible when we were at uni. And if you look at page 447 of this tome, it's got a picture of the fossil grove, which is, so we all knew about it as students in the 70s, and it's fascinating to sort of be part of the story of the preservation of this facility. Yeah. Any more? I'm trying to think. Any questions? Any other trees of the same species found everywhere? Yeah, I mean, the lepidodendron is the most common tree in the Carboniferous. So a lot of Carboniferous trees, fossils around the world are lepidodendron. It's just unusual to find the stumps, and so many stumps in a sort of living grove, as it were. We often find bits and pieces. The miners would find them all the time, the little, broken bits of bark and stuff. But to find a whole stump and that many stumps together is unusual. And then the fact that it was preserved and not destroyed by diggers, bulldozers, miners, whatever. So that it's a rare thing, and it's even rarer that it's been preserved and conserved, and we need to keep it that way. Yeah, someone said put a name, all people donate. Yes, the main plan is to get our vision in concrete down. If we can come up with, having got these next set of studies done, to have a vision that we as a trust group and the lottery people can agree that that's the way to go, then we want to have a big fundraising thing. We'll do a big publicity drive, but it's no good just saying, give us some money, and we don't even know what we're doing with it. We just know, we need to have a plan and a strategic vision that we all agree with. And then we'll do that, and we'll have a name. We'll have a name board with gold, silver, bronze, platinums, all that sort of thing. Yeah, we will do all that. That's all. But we're just a bit away from all that at the moment. We just haven't got a vision that we can all agree on. Yeah, someone's talked about, Matthew's talking about the climate change summit coming. Yeah, well, we actually had planned that in the original, when it was originally planned before it was rescheduled, that we would offer some sort of tours as part of it, because it is a wonderful place and it's not far from the SEC to come. We could take delegates to it. So if it's rescheduled and it's appropriate, yes, I'd like to get the COP people coming in to tell us, because we have a climate story here, an ancient climate story right on the doorsteps of the COP conference. So yes, very good. I'm just trying to think. Where are we? Phil, same species and generally the same age of stumps on the east coast around the corner from St Andrews. I guess so. I don't know them. I'm not an expert on east coast geology. I guess they're Carboniferous. Yes, I'll look it up, but there's certainly tree fossils in the Carboniferous, but these are, the fact that there's so many of them in growth position is what's unique here. Matthew's saying more, yeah, fundraise at the same time as the climate summit. Yes, these are wonderful things we'd love to do, yeah. Good idea. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Matthew. Any questions I've missed? I'm scrolling through the chat line here, but I'm just trying to find ones that are lots of thank yous. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Yes, Phil says there are the Carboniferous. They're quite large in the tidal area. Yes, well, good. Yes, I'd like to go and see them. Actually, I'll read up about them. See how, and compare and contrast. That was the. Yes, there's one at Wrexham, Brimbo. There's also a site in Sheffield that had some wooden sheds over them. So these things do exist. It's not as if it's. Yes. Yes, I'm looking through that. Yeah, Brimbo. Yes, they're trying to do. They have the same sort of. They're trying to preserve and get some money to put some sort of building over the things as well, because they got the same story to tell. It's about the North Wales coalfield and its history as well as the geology. It's a good place to go to. Looking for volunteers and members. Yes, we haven't. What we'd want to do is to try and come up with a volunteering scheme that if we're going to have volunteers to come and do Sunday afternoon, first Sunday of the month sort of tours, then we'll start over the winter trying to get a sort of rota and interested people involved in that, and sort of get a Friends of the Fossil Grove. That's all these sort of things I want to get involved with. COVID's just sort of just thrown things up in the air a little bit, but yes. Natalie's come from France because she asked some questions. Yes, geotourism and yes, I mean this is an important site, and it should be preserved for forever. And for geotourism, it's an important thing, and we want to see it. Why can't the open top buses stop at the end of the road there and come in and see it? That's the sort of thing we'd love to see it be on the sort of tourist map. We do get tourists. You get the 100 a day, but it could be get more. So promoting it, making sure it's on that sort of tourist map, big donation bucket. Yeah, these are the things we want to try and do, but it all takes a lot of effort. Okay, how are we doing for time? Yeah, well, that's pretty good. Any other questions? I'm just going to just leave the meeting sort of open. If you want, if you've got some pals you want to chat to, do. If you want to talk to me off with your mic on, do that as people disappear. That's okay. But if you've got any other questions for me that you want to just do on the mic, that'll be fine. I'll just leave the meeting open. Hope you've enjoyed it. Text messages as well.
Just a question, David, about the this presentation. Will it be available to other people online at a future date?
Yeah, yes, John, I have recorded it. So I will stick it onto the Scottish Geology Trust website. I will create a YouTube link.
I've got quite a few members in the Liverpool GeoSoc would be interested in this, and I didn't tell them about this talk. They weren't aware of the festival, but I'll certainly tell them about this. I think they'd be quite interested. So that link would be quite useful. So I'd get on the website presumably.
Yes, yeah. I put any talks I'm recording, I'm putting onto the Scottish Geology Trust, scottishgeology.com will be where the link will be.
It will be on the Glasgow GeoSoc website.
Yes, well, there'll be a link there as well. I get Bill will put a link there for me as well. Yeah.
When will that be available?
In the next day or so, when I get.
Right.
I have to download the Zoom thing, convert it, upload it, and all that jazz. And I have to top and tail, get the front bit off and the back bit off. So there's a bit of video editing to do. But yes, I will do that in the next wee while. Won't be long. I'll probably, when I send the next, everyone that's here has got an invite to this. We'll get an invite to the next Zoom talk and the next one, and the ones that have done that have a recording, I'll put the link on that email as well. So. There'll be various ways of getting the link. That would be no problem.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Some of the speakers in my in the Geological Society lectures don't want their talk recorded for obvious reasons. They're professionals and they want to. They do the circuit. But I'm an amateur. This is not. You know, I'm happy for this to be broadcast and used and.
I didn't quite pick up the number of people who attended tonight. What was the total number?
I don't know. It was well over 80 when I last looked. But I get a report from Zoom. I can go back into Zoom reports as the host and get a complete list of everybody. So I know.
There's a lot of interest on people attending. Do you find that a lot of people just get sent the Zoom link from other people, or is it done formally through yourself? Because my
idea was that you had to request it, yeah?
Because I think that's important because recently the Manchester Geology Association, they were a little bit worried about people attending the talks who hadn't formally emailed a request. So I think the waiting room is quite useful.
Yes, well, I've done that. What I wanted to do was make sure that you had to email me to get a link. I didn't want, but then I can't then stop people passing it around their pals. That's not, once they've got the link, they could pass it around. But I didn't want to put the link on an open website, for example.
I think that's a good idea.
The other option I had was that it was only open to members, and I would live stream it on YouTube, but it's just too technical, and I just thought, no, it's hard enough doing this anyway without trying more technology. So,
yeah. One final question: the Hunterian Museum in Glasgow. I've been there a couple of times in the past. Is there much on their website about the fossil growth?
Yeah, the Hunterian has got some lovely stuff in it. That Arthur Pleura thing and the Bearsden shark is in the Hunterian and stuff like that. So.
Right.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things in the Hunterian and in the Kelvingrove, and in the National Museum of Scotland. So there's a lot of, I had a vision that at least we could get some casts or some replicas of these things on display at the Fossil Grove and put them in context rather than just, you know, Arthur Plura next to the Egyptian mummy or something. Let's have all this stuff where it can be, the whole story can be told, and that's where you know,
Yeah.
there's more to the Carboniferous than just 11 to the fossil grove, just 11 tree stumps.
Yeah. Another question about the excavation of the Whitehead, the Clyde Tunnel, when it was excavated. Did that contribute to understanding the local geology when we did so?
Oh, I don't know of any reports on the geology. There must have been some.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know of it. I don't know. I wasn't round in Glasgow at the time, so
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it might be interesting to know. I mean, some people in the Geological Society may know. There must have been some geological surveys done, because they must have been worried about mine workings and water ingress and stuff.
Well, the data you showed on the sections, presumably, is it borehole data? From the,
well, there's a lot of borehole data. I mean, there's a lot of borehole data being used by the British Geological Survey at the moment to try and understand mine water as a sort of geothermal resource. So I think the underground geology of Glasgow is pretty well understood in terms of its sort of stratigraphy and it's where the water's going and coming from. But,
yeah, because I think in Rutherglen there's some work going on at the moment, isn't there, on looking at...
BGS is doing a big study on thermal mine water, as a district heating source. Yes, right. Yes. So that's another story which I perhaps should have put in, because there's it's already all talking about the industrial legacy and the archaeology, but that legacy is now leading us into a new future of a heating system of all the hot water in the mines being used as a heating scheme. So that's so that's the Carboniferous giving us another help.
Yeah. Well, thanks, David. I'm going to sign off now. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, John. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Any other chat? I'm going to go home. I'm going to go and get a glass of wine and relax.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay. I'm going to ask my mother whether she enjoyed it or not. Hi, Mum. Did you enjoy that? Did you understand it?
Yes. Well, yes, I'm not some of it anyway. Yeah, it was very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you. Yeah. 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 Yeah, Shropshire is, my mother's in Shropshire, and it's where I learnt my geology. I mean, my geology wasn't Carboniferous trees; it was Silurian trilobites. Is where I learnt, where I started from. Yeah,
you got the card with the Shropshire.
Yes,
your birthday card with the Shropshire.
Yes, yes. So lots of memories of good memories of Shropshire. Yeah. Mm. Yes. Okay. Right.
Yeah. Okay, love.
Okay. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Okay, good night, everybody. I'm going to turn this off now.